You're saying.
You know, Charles in charge retired. Oh, yeah. I did not know. Okay. Dr. Gray says, Joyce is moved on. They're in transition. This just one can, I guess.
Good for you today.
Ready?
Hey, Cindy wasn't looking too good this morning, so you guys have been spared.
Okay. I hope she recovers from the holidays.
Yeah, she had her walking pneumonia this morning, I should call it. She was in, and then did a Teams call, and she would have scared you guys if she showed up.
Can't have that.
Good afternoon and welcome to the December crop production and WASDE briefing. My name is Lance Hoding and I serve as chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board at NASS. This briefing is for the Secretary of Agriculture and other policymakers at USDA to better understand the content and context of today's report. We're very pleased to have Robert Bonney, USDA's Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, joining us as Secretary designate today. We also welcome Dr. Joe Cooper from the Office of the Chief Economist's Office. And we also have a number of visitors with us today. We have a group of Senate legislative assistants joining us. So welcome to all of you. And although he's not in the room at the moment, I'd also like to express our appreciation to Mark Hudson from our Florida office, who came in to assist us with today's report. Before I turn things over to our presenters, I do have a few notes for our live streaming audience. The crop production and WASDE reports are considered principal federal economic indicator reports. The Office of Management and Budget provides specific guidance on how these important reports are to be released. OMB statistical policy instructs policymaking officials to refrain from making public comment regarding the content of these reports within 30 minutes of their release. Therefore, we will not be taking questions from the public during this briefing. Both NASS and World Board staff are available for phone and email questions, and NASS will host a social media event at 1 o'clock Eastern Time today. We strive to have everything presented at this briefing match the official record. However, should there be any discrepancy, always refer to the official published estimates. With that, I'll turn things over to Patrick Boyle. He is the chief of the NASS Crops Branch. Patrick will be immediately followed by Dr. Marta Czekanowski, chair of the World Ag Outlook Board. Patrick.
All right. Thank you, Lance. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to those joining us on the live stream as well. As I normally do, before we get into the acreage and production data, I wanted to share some information on the data sources that were used to prepare today's report. In green, you'll see some information on our objective measurement program for Florida citrus crops. This month, our sample included 1,623 groves. In mid-November, our trained enumerators took measurements and collected data from those groves. Also for cotton, we conducted a survey of more than 400 cotton gins, in fact, all active cotton gins, and asked them questions about the cotton that they've ginned so far this season and their expectations going forward. Next up, this chart has some data from our weekly crop progress and condition report. It shows the percent of the cotton crop that has been harvested by week. The red dotted line there is 2024, and then you can see that by November 24th, 84% of the cotton crop had been harvested. That's 4 percentage points ahead of the 5-year average and 3 percentage points ahead of last year. Now let's take a look at the acreage and production data for cotton from today's report. No changes to planted or harvested acreage from our November forecast. Planted acreage is up 944,000 acres or 9.2% from last year. Harvested acreage is up more than 2 million acres or 34.1% from 2023. Moving over to yield. Yield is forecast up slightly from November, just 0.4%, but down nearly 12% compared to last year. As a result, total production at 14.3 million bales is up 0.5% from the previous forecast and 18.1% compared to 2023. This chart shows how the current month's yield forecast ranks historically. The green line shows the final yields for each of the last 30 years, as well as this month's forecasted yield. The gray line represents a trend line, which is a moving historical average. As you can see, at 792 pounds per acre, that's the lowest yield since 2015 and well below the historic trend line. And here's a breakdown of cotton yields by state. So just to give you a little orientation of what all the numbers and colors mean on this map. The top number is the current yield forecast measured in pounds per acre. The bottom number is the percent change from the previous month's forecast. If you see a pound sign next to the top number, that represents a record high. States shaded in blue are showing an increase from the previous month, while states shaded in red are showing a decrease. The deeper the color, the greater the change. And states in gray are unchanged from the previous forecast. So as you can see, a number of states, including Georgia, are up from last month. Missouri is showing a record high. Texas, the largest cotton producing state, however, is showing a month-over-month decrease. And here's a really similar map, except this one's the yield comparison to the previous year. There's quite a lot of red on this map indicating year-over-year declines, including in the top 3 cotton producing states, which are Texas, Georgia, and Arkansas. Now the last slide on cotton. This is a quick look at the total production and how it compares to recent years. As I mentioned a couple slides ago, this month's forecast at 14.3 million bales is up 18% compared to last year. Switching over to sugarcane, harvested acres is unchanged from the previous forecast and down 0.6% from last year. Yield at 37.8 tons per acre is down 1% from last month, but up 4.1% compared to 2023. And that results in a total production of just over 34.9 million tons, down 1% from last month, but up 3.4% from last year. And that's the highest level since 2020. Now, a summary of the citrus crops in today's report. And I will note here that we did make updates only to Florida this month. Estimates from the other states were carried forward from October. I also want to note that these are the first forecasts that include the impact of Hurricane Milton, which dumped very heavy rains throughout central Florida in mid-October. So looking at the numbers there, all orange production is forecast to be down 5.2% or 3 million boxes from October and down 9.9% or 6 million boxes from last season. Non-Valencia and Valencia oranges are both down from the previous forecast and last year. Grapefruit comes in at 295,000 tons. That's down 3% from the last forecast and 14.2% from last season. No changes on lemons from October, but up 7.5% from last year. Finally, tangerines down slightly from October and down 9% from last season. And before I wrap things up for my portion today, here's a quick look at a few of our upcoming reports. Next week, we'll be releasing our Census of Aquaculture results. And later in December, we've got cotton ginnings, cattle on feed, hogs and pigs, and ag prices reports. Now looking ahead to January, we've got our care reports on the 2nd. And going to be a busy day on the 10th, a whole assortment of data coming out on the 10th, including our monthly crop production report, as well as our 2024 annual summary. So big day on the 10th of January. And we do want to put in a quick plug for the Ag Outlook Forum, which is coming up in February. You can get more information on that and register on the USDA's website. And then as Lance mentioned earlier, we are at 1 o'clock Eastern today hosting a session of Stat Chat on X, where we'll take additional questions and share information on today's reports. As always, the full reports are available on our website, and that concludes my portion of today's briefing. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Jekanowski.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to walk you through the WASDE report next. As you saw from Patrick's presentation this morning, we didn't get a lot of new information with regard to Supplies of the primary crops in the WASDE, so relatively minor changes to most of the US balance sheets. But there's still a lot going on in December. We're looking at international developments. We're going to focus a little bit on the situation of palm oil in Malaysia and talk a little bit about the India cotton outlook as well. So let's go ahead and start out with the wheat balance sheet. World wheat production down a bit this month, but still record high globally. Global production at just under 793 million tons would be record high. Most of the reduction this month is reflecting lower production in the European Union based on harvest results across several of the states there. Also worth noting, not listed on this slide, but Brazil wheat production we lowered by 400,000 tons, and we have new data there from StatsCan and ABARES as well, Canada and Australia. Those numbers came out earlier in the week and relatively similar to what we had been forecasting. Global wheat balance sheet. Beginning stocks up a little bit this month, mainly reflecting some adjustments in our back year adjustments in EU production, EU and Syria. We talked about production already being record high, though down a bit this month. Ending stocks up a little bit this month, but still would be the lowest since 2015-16. So relatively tight. Trade with regard to global exports in particular, Russian exports, we reduced by 1 million tons this month. Russia, as you may know, they have an export quota now, so we expect that to start to constrain their wheat exports going forward. We also lowered the EU by 1 million tons based on their smaller crop. Offset by higher exports for the US and Ukraine. Ukraine exports, we raised 500,000 tons, now at 16.5 million tons. So speaking of the US balance sheet here, changes this month really limited just to the exports and imports, and just really truing up to observed data. So we raised our import forecast 5 million bushels. That's all hard red spring wheat coming in. Exports raised 25 million bushels. 15 of that is white wheat exports, primarily to East Asian destinations, and then also higher exports, 5 million bushels each of hard red spring and soft red winter. No change in our season average market price, and we have about 60% roughly of the crop is currently marketed. Rice production, global rice production also forecast to be record high. Not too many changes in terms of our production outlook this month. Brazil up a bit. That's higher area based on the planting pace in Brazil currently underway. Australia was reduced a bit, as you can see there, based on government data, the ABARES report. And Philippines is down 300,000 tons, reflecting some typhoons in November that caused some damage. Global rice balance sheet. Here we got, again, record production. Also record trade, record rice trade. Raised global trade this month, 1.2 million tons, and reflecting higher exports out of Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Brazil. And that year over year, fairly large increase in ending stocks is mainly reflecting higher stocks in India. US balance sheet. No changes here in aggregate, but there are some offsetting by class changes in our export forecast. Long grain rice exports reduced 2 million hundredweight based on relatively slow shipments to Western Hemisphere markets. But offsetting that is higher exports, 2 million hundredweight increase in medium short grain to markets such as Japan and South Korea. No change to our season average price for rice this month either. Okay, let's move into corn. Quite a bit going on in corn this month relative to some of the other commodities. Global production down 1.5 million tons, driven primarily by the EU and Mexico. Mexico reduced forecast there reflects lower expected winter corn area. And that is due to drought, ongoing drought, prolonged drought that has been causing some concerns about reservoir levels there. So this is, we reduced Mexico's production last month as well. So that problem is persisting. EU corn production down based on harvest results, 800,000 tons, and Ukraine also there just adjusting to recent harvest results, showing a little bit larger crop there. Global balance sheet. Now in this case, I put up, you see 2 years of the balance sheet. The back year, 2023, 2024, I included because that actually reflects the crop that Brazil is currently still marketing. And there you can see the main thing I wanted to point out is our lower trade forecast for the back year on corn. That reflects slower shipments, corn shipments out of Brazil. Brazil, as you might know, they've been building up their domestic ethanol industry, domestic demand for corn, exporting relatively less, but that's giving more of an opportunity for U.S. corn. So now with regard to the out year balance sheet, 2024, 2025, on the left side of the table here, feed use adjusted a little bit higher this month, 2.9 million tons. That reflects higher feed use in Brazil, EU, Iran, partially offset by lower feed use in Indonesia. And in our trade forecast raised here 3.2 million tons this month. That reflects higher exports out of the US, partially offset by lower exports from the EU. Ending stocks down, that's mainly lower stocks in the US and China. And also worth noting here that we reduced our China import forecast 2 million tons this month. Now it's at 14 million tons, and if realized, that would be the lowest volume of China imports since 2019, 2020. U.S. corn balance sheet. I already made reference, I think, to the strong U.S. exports, and you can see there that we raised our export forecast this month by 150 million bushels. Just reflecting strong sales and shipments, good demand for U.S. corn internationally. We also raised our corn use for ethanol forecast 50 million bushels. And again, we're seeing a strong pace of corn use for ethanol. Right now, corn use for ethanol is running at about the highest pace since 2017. So a lot of strength there. Increased ethanol exports as well. And with that, with higher domestic use, no changes in supply, ending stocks tightens up. And as it stands right now, we're forecasting slightly tighter ending stocks year over year for corn, down 22 million bushels from last year. No change to our season average price forecast this month. Global soybean production forecast higher by 1.7 million tons this month, driven mainly by higher production in Argentina, reflecting that's area. higher area as that crop is being planted, about 50% planted right now. Also higher area in Bolivia, which isn't listed there. And the increase in Canada, this reflects recent data from Stats Canada, reflecting the crop that was just recently harvested. Global soybean balance sheet. Main thing I'd bring to your attention here is the increase in crush this month, 1.3 million ton increase. That is primarily an increased crush in Argentina. And that is leading to more meal and oil exports from Argentina. Also worth noting, higher soybean oil exports from Brazil and the United States as well. We'll talk about the United States in a second. Trade, soybean exports up 300,000 tons. That is primarily higher exports out of Canada. And on the other hand, we raised our import forecast for Algeria. Now back briefly to the crush story and the palm oil and the soybean oil story. Much of this increase in soybean oil exports that we're seeing from Brazil, the US, and Argentina reflects tighter palm oil supplies. And so it's going to take a little bit of a tangent here just to talk a little bit about the palm oil market and recent price developments there. You can see here time series showing soybean oil in the US and Argentina plotted along with palm oil prices. Historically, palm oil typically maintained a premium, soybean oil typically maintained a premium to palm oil. More recently, that premium has switched. Now palm oil has strengthened in price considerably and making soybean oil, including from the US, much more competitive. And this just reflects tightening supplies of palm oil, reflecting some weather conditions, dryness earlier this year in Indonesia and Malaysia, recent excessive rain, and it led us to reduce our palm oil production forecasts for both Indonesia, and Malaysia going forward. Let's talk about Malaysia in particular for just a minute here. This is just a map of the main areas of Malaysia where palm oil is produced. This part, of course, is Peninsula Malaysia, and this is more eastern Malaysia. Then, of course, Indonesia right below, also a major palm oil producer. Between Malaysia and Indonesia, this covers 90+% of the global palm oil production. Weather has been a driving factor recently in our outlook for both Malaysia and Indonesia, but focusing here on Peninsula Malaysia. Notice there was some dryness earlier this year. This dryness typically will show up as reduced production potential about 6 months later. So that crop that is the palm oil that's recently harvested. And then the other thing that jumps out at you here is this huge increase in rainfall right here at the end of November. What we witnessed there was essentially about 6 months of rain hitting Malaysia, parts of Malaysia, over about a 5-day period. And coming right at peak harvest, or at one of the peak harvests, and that created some pretty complicated logistics for harvest, lots of harvest loss, and that led us to reduce Malaysia's palm oil production forecast by about 500,000 tons. And then this is a rainfall trace for eastern Malaysia, which would also correspond to Indonesia as well. Again, you see that dryness earlier in the season, which is expected to show up as reduced production potential in about now, recent harvest time. So all this to say, the bottom line is palm oil supplies are tight, reflecting recent weather conditions, and that is creating some opportunities for for soybean oil exports from US, Brazil, and Argentina. Real quick, just the US soybean balance sheet. As you can see here, no real changes to any of the supply and use components, but we did reduce our season average soybean price forecast 60 cents per bushel this month. Just reflecting recent price patterns. And at this point in the year, we have roughly about a third of the crop marketed at $10 per bushel. Soybean oil balance sheet. Wanted to put this up again this month, just to drive home this story about the strong export demand for soybean oil. You see, we raised our soybean oil export forecast by 500 million pounds this month, showing a very large year-over-year increase in soybean oil exports as well. Raised our extraction rate. That higher production is reflecting a higher extraction rate, 270 million tons, and pulling back a little bit from some of the food and other uses to really feed that export market, and ending stocks tightening up a bit this month as well. But the main story here is, again, that strong export demand for soybean oil, reflecting those relatively tighter supplies of palm oil. So moving into cotton. So we got a 1.2 million bale increase this month globally in cotton production, dominated by India, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. Also some changes in Argentina. That's an area adjustment there based on MinAg data. Brazil up a little bit based on recent data from Conabi. But the main story in cotton this month is in India. And essentially what we're seeing there is really favorable weather conditions. This is, again, just a map of the main production areas, main cotton production areas in India. And the bottom line is that India this year had an excellent monsoon. At first glance, one might say that this huge increase in rainfall, well above average, could that be too much or damaging? But in fact, the rain occurred when it needed to occur, and it ended when it needed to end. So by the time excessive rains could have caused damage during flowering or when the bolls were open, the rains had pretty much stopped. So they had really good growing conditions during the year. Good timing of this rainfall. And as you can see here, again, just emphasizing how good of a monsoon this was this year. Total precipitation in India, about 2 standard deviations above average this year. And it's reflected as well in very favorable vegetation indices across the main cotton growing areas of the country. So in terms of the balance sheet, global balance sheet, cotton consumption raised this month, 600,000 bales. That mainly reflects higher consumption in Pakistan and Vietnam, but it's worth noting that there are also offsetting changes in China and India. We lowered China's consumption 500 million bales and increased India's by the same amount, 500 million. So on net across those 4 countries, we end up with about a 600,000 bale increase in consumption. Trade, cotton exports raised this month 100,000 bales, mainly reflecting higher exports out of Brazil. We raised our Brazil cotton export forecast 200,000 bales this month, and then there were a few offsetting reductions in other countries, but cotton exports out of Brazil continue to be very strong. In terms of the U.S. balance sheet, really not much here this month. Essentially, we took the small production change that Patrick talked about a few minutes ago from NAS, raising production 60,000 bales, and that essentially ends up in ending stocks in unaccounted with no meaningful changes in any of the other use categories. And no change in our season average price forecast this month, which remains 66 cents per pound. All right, sugar. In terms of the sugar balance sheet, again, I put up the back year here, 2023, 2024, along with the current year balance sheet. The only thing that changed on the back year was we got some new data from FAS showing an increase in re-export imports. As you can see there, 46,000 tons. Ending stocks are already set at where they are at 2.162 million short tons. So that increase in re-export imports just shows up as a higher equivalent higher domestic deliveries. And then the new crop year, 2024, 2025, some small change in sugar production. Sugar production from beets lowered 50,000 tons this month. That's basically processor data. Processors telling us that they're expecting less desugared molasses, so less sugar coming from desugared molasses. So we've accounted for that in our adjustments. The other thing to point out here is a fairly large increase in sugar imports, including high tier imports. This is important to point out. This is all raw sugar, and as I think you know, we don't forecast raw sugar. So this is raw sugar that as it's entering. So the increase in high tier raw sugar that has come in since the last WASDE. And then this is also a month, December, where we balance everything based on the U.S. needs of a 13.5% stocks to use ratio. So with that setting our ending stocks, we increased Mexican access by 163,000 short tons this month. No real changes to the Mexican sugar balance sheet this month, except of course that export volume there stays the same in total, but there's some adjustments there. Higher exports to the U.S. Perfectly offset by lower exports to other countries. All right, let's move into livestock. We're going to start things off as we always do with beef. And it's worth pointing out here that the beef forecasts this month are a little bit complicated. As you know, we with the discovery of the New World screwworm in Mexico, we have no live cattle imports coming in from Mexico. And so these forecasts assume that those restrictions remain in place throughout the forecast period. As we came in this morning, those restrictions were still in place. We have no idea when they're going to be lifted. They could be lifted tomorrow. They could be lifted a year from now. But for the purposes of our forecast, we have to assume that they remain in place. So that mainly affects the 2025 beef forecasts there, of course. On 2024, for all of the species, we're really just truing up to recent data. Of course, the year is almost over, so those numbers aren't likely to change very much under almost any circumstances. But we did raise our beef production forecast 10 million 10 million pounds this month, just reflecting, again, recent data on higher steer and heifer slaughter and slightly higher weights. 2025 for beef, you see that's where we're making a pretty large reduction in our beef production forecast, 620 million pounds. Just reflecting lower placements due to those reduced imports coming in from Mexico. And worth noting in terms of beef production, that's mainly going to hit the second half of the 2025 and beyond. Pork 2024, also just truing up to recent data, a little bit lighter weights, which we carried through in 2025. So slightly tighter supplies there. Broilers, no change for 2024. 2025, up a bit, reflecting reflecting recent hatchery data, expected to increase production in the first quarter. And turkey production also adjusted, reflecting 2024, reflecting hatchery data increase, and 2025 turkey production down a bit, mainly reflecting some recent HPAI culling due to HPAI outbreaks. Prices, no change in our steer price for 2024, but full 2025 quite a bit higher, reflecting tighter supply expectations. And on hogs, raised our price forecasts there as well. We've seen some recent strength in the hog market. That's driving 2024, and we expect that to carry into 2025. No change in our broiler price forecast. And turkeys, again, we've just seen some recent strength in turkey prices, which is welcome, given that it's been a while since we've seen positive numbers on the slide for our turkey price forecast. Meat trade, again, here, the main one that jumps out at you is our reduced beef export forecast in 2025. Again, that's just reflecting those tighter supply expectations. For 2024, all the species were really, again, just truing up to recent trade data with the year almost over. Seeing a little bit slower growth in pork exports. So that's where we pulled down our pork export forecast for both years there. And the other one I'd point out, beef import forecast. Raised our forecast for 2024, reflecting recent strength, observed strength, and raised it as well for 2025, reflecting tighter supplies, expected to bring in more beef next year. And that is worth noting, mostly processing grade feed. We'll wrap things up here with dairy. The main story in terms of the U.S. milk supply and demand is that we're starting to see some herd expansion. Most recent milk production report showed more cows for 2024. We expect that to carry into 2025 as well. So these forecasts reflect that higher cow inventories, slightly offset by lower milk per cow, but overall higher milk production this year carrying into 2025. In terms of product trade on a fat basis, mainly what we're seeing here is higher imports and higher exports of butter and cheese, reflecting strong demand both domestically and internationally for those products. And then on a skim solids basis, lower exports, and that mainly reflects lower non-fat dry milk exports. Prices are strengthening. We're losing some of our global competitive advantage in our NDM prices. So pulling back our export forecasts there. In terms of prices, so 2024, again, really just truing up to recent data. 2025 cheese price forecast, we reduced a bit. We're expecting to see some new cheese production capacity coming online next year. And also we have relatively strong cheese inventories, so those higher supplies are going to weigh a little bit on prices into next year. Also, we're starting to see butter prices pull back a little bit, expecting that to continue into 2025. Dry products in particular, continue to see strong demand there, supporting prices both in 2024 and expecting that to carry into 2025 as well. But overall, what this is saying is higher production tending to put some pressure on prices. In terms of the class prices, for 2024, class 3 price, we lowered 15 cents per hundredweight with the lower cheese price more than offsetting the higher whey price. For 2025, class 3 price lowered 50 cents per hundredweight, reflecting the same conditions. Class 4 price raised 10 cents per hundredweight in 2025. Higher NDM prices offset the lower butter prices. And the all milk prices, as you can see there, kind of falling out of the class prices. All milk price for 2024 reduced by a dime, and in 2025 down by 30 cents per hundredweight, for about a 10-cent reduction year over year. And that's where I'm going to wrap up the market discussion. One other point I want to make, important for the World Board, is that today is the last WASDE that our chief meteorologist, Mark Brusberg, will be attending. After 40 years of service, he'll be retiring at the end of this year. So just wanted to wish him well and thank him for all of his support over these years. Wish we had a plaque or something. Oh, wait a minute, we do. Wanted to just give you your, come on up here.
Oh, thank you.
And for a minute, and this is Mark's first weekly weather and crop bulletin that he worked on in 1996.
There you go.
So with that, I'm going to wrap up the live streaming. And thank you all for attending, both in the room and online. And we'll see you back here next month. And with that, I'll turn it over to you for questions.